Good evening. Thank you for joining us for the relationship between food and mood, part of the Burbank Public Library's Mental Health in Uncertain Times Book to Action initiative. Sponsored by the California Center for the Book, Book to Action builds on the basic book club concept and expands it to create a dynamic series of events for adults and intergenerational groups. We encourage you to participate in all our programs. We have focused on the theme of mental health this spring. Find out more at burbanklibrary.org. When you leave the program, you will be redirected to an evaluation form, and we would greatly appreciate it if you would fill it out to help us improve our programs in the future. We'd like to thank the Friends of the Burbank Public Library for their sponsorship of this program. I would now like to introduce to you Shaunte Ani. She will provide a look at what we eat, in what order, at what time of day, and discuss the amazing relationship between eating habits and mood, weight, and mental health.
Thank you, David. Can everybody hear me?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, great. Let me share this. Thank you so much, Burbank Public Library. Let's get to it. Where is it? Okay, so the relationship between food and mood is complicated, to say the least. There's a lot to consider. What we do is we take a bunch of brain MRIs. MRIs taken when you're looking at a picture of a hamburger or smelling a certain food or listening to sounds. And we take hundreds and hundreds of these brain MRIs and we put them together, and we spend about 17 hours per MRI scan, and it comes up with all these numbers, and these numbers eventually translate into the useful information that's going to come up on the next slide. This screen is pretty much what I stare at all day. Just like a car, your brain can be damaged if you ingest anything other than good quality fuel. So why do we do that? Why do we even gain and lose weight? It should be a balance between the number of calories that we bring in and the number of calories that we use to move around and exercise. But stress affects our appetite in a couple of different ways. Short-term stress actually decreases our desire to eat, whereas long-term stress makes us eat more. There are stress hormones that flood the blood, glucocorticoids, and they cause us to eat higher calorie comfort foods. Females tend to be more affected by this than males. Where is it? So how does this work? Where is it? How does this work? Short-term stress inhibits certain regions of a brain part called the hypothalamus, and this leads to decreases in important signaling mechanisms in the brain that ultimately lead to increased eating. Decreased eating. Long-term stress affects other regions of the hypothalamus, and these lead to an increase in eating these comfort foods. The peptides involved are NPY, AGRP. We can get into that if anybody has a question about those. So why do we crave these comfort foods? Well, take a look at this image here. So you have a stressor, you're busy stressing out, a bunch of cortisol is released into your blood. This leads us to either binge eat when we're not hungry, or to eat fatty foods when we otherwise may have chosen healthier foods. Serotonin and dopamine are temporarily released, causing a short-lasting relief, making us feel a little bit better. When that serotonin and dopamine wears off, we're flooded with all sorts of not so great feelings. One of them may be guilt. This guilt can trigger more stress, and the cycle continues. Eating sugar or sugar substitutes has been proven to immediately decrease that stress hormone, so we think it's making us feel better. It can also decrease your heart rate and behavioral anxiety, again, just for a few minutes. The brain region involved in this dampened stress response is the amygdala. It's the same brain region that processes fear. Here it is in the red. So we eat the comfort foods. We have these changes that are molecular and cellular in the amygdala, And in the moment, we have that same great feeling that we may have from addictive drugs. So we think, okay, when I'm not feeling great, I'm going to reach for comfort foods and it's going to be okay. So what about mood? You can actually eat yourself into a permanent bad mood in 2 days. All you have to do is eat something with more calories in it. Make sure it's got tons of salt and fat. You'll notice mood shifts, impatience, anger, and unstable blood sugar, a type of cycle of sugar crashes and sugar highs that lead to more irritability, impatience, mood swings, and of course, eating more of these high fat, high sugar foods. Screen, okay. Where am I? The order in which you eat your foods makes a difference. So in order to eat less and yet feel more satisfied, start your meal and your snack with fat instead of carbs and proteins. If you're going to eat carbs, make sure to add protein or fat and fat to it. Here's some examples of major food groups that comprise carbohydrates, proteins, and fats. Notice that 1 gram of a protein gives you 4 calories of energy, or 4 calories towards gaining a pound. Same thing with a carb, but a fat actually gives you 9. If you eat in this way, with making sure that the fat part of your meal is in the beginning, your enzymes are going to be more active and your satisfaction with your food and feeling like you're more full is going to be increased. Fasting is something that people ask about often. It may or may not work. We can go into details about that, but for most people, we do need to eat a meal or a snack every 4 to 5 hours. We just talked about fats. Keep in mind there are 2 types of fats. Unsaturated fats are the ones that we need to be eating way more of. These are the healthy fats. And saturated fats, we eat at least 3 times as much of as we need to in the US, and we really need to tone these down. It's all the ones you would imagine, right? The fatty meats, cheese, ice cream, fried foods, etc. So how does mood affect food? We just talked about how food affects mood. It turns out this has been analyzed in thousands of people, so it may not be true for every single person, but there is a tendency. If you're someone who's open to new experiences, you tend to eat more fruit, vegetables, and salad and less meat and soft drinks. If you consider yourself to be easygoing and agreeable, you tend to eat less meat. If you're conscientious, you consume greater amounts of food and less meats, sweets, and soft drinks. If you have neurotic tendencies, as diagnosed by a physician and not with a self-quiz, you tend to consume more sweet and savory foods. Mood is affected by a lot of vitamins and minerals. Some of them are folate, zinc, magnesium, iron, selenium, vitamin D. And if you have enough of these, it's protective against anxiety, mood swings, and irritability. What's amazing is that 20% of the sugar that you eat that is required by the body is actually consumed by the brain. So the brain is just this 3-pound organ in the body. It's very small as compared to the rest, but it uses 20% of the sugar. That's especially interesting considering that 60% of the brain is made of fat. Another study, people watching happy films reach for grapes when given an option between grapes and popcorn. People watching sad movies reach for popcorn, actually. What does that tell you? People watching something sad are looking to have their spirits lifted and are going for the higher carb, junkier food than the healthier food. So these carbs, they don't all release into the blood at the same pace. We have something called a glycemic index. If you know anyone who's had diabetes, you're familiar with this term. Low GI foods allow your blood sugar to rise and fall slowly. This includes what you would expect: high fiber, whole grains, oats, fruits, and vegetables. That's the green part of the index here. And then, of course, we have the red part of the index and everything in between. On the red side, we have high GI foods. These cause dramatic spikes and drops in blood sugar, getting those sugar crashes, getting the cortisol flooding the blood, irritability, lack of concentration. You can feel really weak. You can feel quite sick. Mood swings are a given if you're on a high GI food diet. And in the long term, a high GI diet will lead to depression. This includes processed foods, sugar, sweetened drinks, and cakes. You may notice that corn is on the red side over here. That doesn't mean don't ever eat corn. It just means realize that the sugar in the corn reaches the blood faster than, say, the sugar in the strawberry. Another study, people at hockey games. During winning games, they actually tasted sweet foods more sweetly and sour foods with less sour in them. And during losing games, the opposite was true. So our feelings actually change the taste of what we're eating. How do we deal with this? Slow down. Eat mindfully. Try not to be doing something else when you're eating because it gives us a chance to regulate our emotions instead of counting on food to regulate for us. A couple of other, neuro tips and tricks here. If you eat the same amount of food on a small plate as on a big plate, your brain thinks you ate more food, even if you ate the same amount, and feels more full from the same amount of food. Another one, using a smaller fork or spoon forces you to kind of slow down a little bit. It takes 7 to 8 minutes for the signal that you are full to travel from your stomach to your brain so that you can put the fork down. So it's a question of how many calories can you fit in if you're eating quickly during those 7 to 8 minutes that you actually didn't want. None of what I said up until now matters if you're not getting enough sleep. Sleep prevents binge eating, prevents depression. It decreases the likelihood that you're going to reach for the junk foods. Neuroanatomically, if you don't get enough sleep, you're inhibiting the prefrontal cortex. That's the same area of the brain that's impaired when you're drunk. So not getting enough sleep, you're making terrible decisions because your PFC is inhibited. So of course you're not going to be reaching for the carrot sticks. Of course you're going to go for the ice cream. Another thing that matters before anything else with the foods is drinking enough water. 75% of our body is made up of water, and even a mild dehydration significantly impacts our mood and alertness. The feeling of thirst in your throat kicks in even when you're 1 to 2% dehydrated. If you're hydrated, it's much less likely that you're going to reach for those junk foods. Caffeine and alcohol have a dehydrating effect on the body. So if those are part of your diet, remember to counter them with water drinking. If you don't get enough water, the neuroanatomical result is that you have interference with the functions of your hypothalamus. This leads to memory issues and a lot of other things. There are these chemicals in the brain. They're tiny. Your body produces them. They're molecules. They're natural molecules, and they're called neurotransmitters. And you've heard of all of these. So let's hack what we know here. Dopamine is a neurotransmitter that activates your sense of pleasure, and it increases alertness and concentration, and improves your reaction time, such as if you're driving. Dopamine is found in lots of different protein foods. Serotonin manages your sleep and appetite and helps you balance your mood and reduces pain and anxiety. Pain as in physical pain. Most dietary proteins contain serotonin, as does chocolate. But if you eat pounds and pounds of chocolate a day, you're going to create other health issues. Serotonin has a precursor in the body, which means that we use tryptophan in the body to make serotonin. And sunlight helps us take the tryptophan in our body and convert it to serotonin. Endorphins, they're natural pain relievers. The level of pain you may feel from a broken leg is significantly less because of endorphins. They promote calmness and serenity. They relieve anxiety and depression. Endorphins are found in chocolate, strawberries, spicy foods. But again, if you're going to have other health effects from some of these, then just make sure to balance it out or have your pros and cons sorted with your provider. Exercise is a non-food way to get endorphins. It's free, really. Oxytocin is another neurotransmitter. It helps you feel relaxation, social connection, love. It helps with breastfeeding. It's found in eggs, bananas, salmon, nuts, beans, legumes. And guess what? Sunlight also makes the oxytocin in your body more bioavailable to you, which means you get to use it more and for longer. The microbiome is coming up a lot in neuroscience nowadays. This is shocking, up to 95% of the body's serotonin, the neurotransmitter we just talked about, is produced in the gut. So if your gut isn't too happy, there's going to be effects on the amount of serotonin that's available in your mood and level of depression and so on. There's a strong link between gut health and phenomena such as autism. Up to 30% of autism and Crohn's disease cases are completely alleviated of all symptoms when the microbiome is adjusted to a healthier one. It's worth looking into if you're having any sort of symptoms. That's called the gut-brain axis, if you've heard of that, and I'm happy to speak further about this if anybody has any questions. So we have two types of eating. We have the eating we do because we need to survive, and that's the homeostatic eating. And then we have the eating we do for pleasure, which isn't done for calories' sake, and it's not done because we're hungry. It's done because we're something else. The homeostatic one is regulated by that important brain region, the hypothalamus, and all sorts of things affect it, such as hormones, gut peptides, and something called nutrient sensing. The pleasure-based eating is regulated by the limbic and cortical and a couple of other brain regions. It's mediated through some of those neurotransmitters that we just talked about. When you eat for pleasure, as in you're not hungry, just eating, we tend to pick foods high in fat and sugar. And these foods actually activate, do you see that here? The red and the green, red and the blue portions, the nucleus accumbens and the ventral tegmental area. So foods high in sugar and fat activate the reward centers in the brain. This is a picture of the brain sideways. So here's the neck and your eyes are here. What happens when you activate these reward centers is you release dopamine, that neurotransmitter that makes you feel so great. So what are foods high in sugar and fat teaching us momentarily, just for a few minutes? That they can pseudo make us feel better. So obviously we go for them. How can you tell if you're really hungry or if you're just emotionally hungry? Emotional hunger comes on suddenly. If somebody yelled at somebody else and a door slammed and there's an argument and all of a sudden you're starving, you just went from 0 to starving, that's a pretty big clue. We're talking about emotional hunger, not physical hunger. Emotional hunger feels like it needs to be satisfied instantly. I will die if I don't eat right now. Whereas most of us have enough fat that we can wait a little bit. Emotional hunger craves specific comfort foods. So if you're saying, I'm not hungry for an apple, I'm hungry for triple layered chocolate German cake, that's a clue that we're not talking about a physical hunger here. Emotional hunger isn't satisfied with a full stomach. If you're mad at that person who just slammed that door, you're probably still going to be mad after cake. Emotional eating triggers feelings of guilt, paralysis, and shame. It's actually really common for people to hide from others in their household how much they've eaten or eat in the car or say that they didn't eat when they just got back. And it's because, we sometimes feel terrible that we did the emotional eating. So physical hunger comes on gradually. We go from being full to being not so full, to being a little bit peckish, to I can eat now too, I'm quite hungry. It doesn't really happen in a single second. Physical hunger can wait. The food's not ready for another 20 minutes, that's okay. Physical hunger is open to lots of options. If you have an apple sitting in front of you and you're hungry, and you're physically hungry, you'll eat the apple. Physical hunger stops when you're feeling full. And eating to satisfy that physical hunger doesn't induce these terrible feelings. If you're not sitting there going, oh, I'm so mad at myself for eating that turkey sandwich for lunch with lettuce and tomato. Let food be your medicine and medicine be your food is something that people have lived by for thousands of years. There's something to it. So we touched on some of this. The amazing thing is all of these vitamins have effects on the brain and the mood. So vitamin D, which you can get from sunlight, eggs, liver, fatty fish, dairy products that are fortified with vitamin D, and supplements. If you don't get enough vitamin D, there's going to be depression and fatigue. Vitamin B12, it's a water-soluble vitamin, which means you're not going to overdose on it. You can have a lot of it, and that's okay. You can find it in clams, meat, poultry, fish, eggs, dairy. A deficiency in B12 will cause depression, fatigue, nerve issues, confusion, dementia, and poor memory. B6 is really important. We've been talking about this for 15 months now, right? It helps us form antibodies. It's also water soluble. You can find it in fish, beef liver, other organ meats, starchy vegetables, and that would be something like a potato. The non-citrus foods, there are a lot of cereals now that have B6 in them. A deficiency in it can cause depression, confusion, and abnormal EEG readings. Those are those wiry kind of pen on a page printouts of what's happening in your brain, the electrical activity that's being measured. It's not so great, right? When your EEG shows something that it's not supposed to. Magnesium you can find in green leafy vegetables, legumes, nuts, seeds, and unrefined whole grains. If you don't have enough magnesium, it's very common to experience fatigue, muscle pains, seizures. Personality changes is actually a thing, and turns out all you need to do is eat a little bit more magnesium. Numbness and tingling is also common. It actually doesn't take that much of a deficiency in magnesium as it does in some of the other vitamins to feel these symptoms. Iron helps transport oxygen from your lungs through your blood all over your body. It's found in lean meats, seafood, nuts, beans, vegetables, fortified grain products. A deficiency in iron, the first thing most people notice is this extreme fatigue that's not explained by something else. Cold hands and feet, headache, dizziness, lightheadedness, impaired cognitive function, difficulty concentrating. Nobody's going to be in a good mood in that case. Omega-3 fatty acids, everybody's hearing about these, the fatty fish contain it. Why should we eat more fatty acids? Because 60% of the brain is made of fatty acids. If we don't have enough, we're going to experience increased cognitive decline. But if we have enough of it, we're going to see a reduced risk of depression, a decreased future dementia or Alzheimer's disease, and a deficiency in omega-3 fatty acids does contribute to ADHD in 35% of cases. How are we doing on time? Okay. So, all right. That's all that stuff about what we shouldn't do. What should we do? Those who have diets that eat more fruits and vegetables are 35% less likely to get depression and have a greatly reduced risk of dementia. The greatest benefits are observed when you eat green leafy vegetables and berries. Strawberry is not a berry, by the way, it's a fruit. Particularly 55 to 80-year-olds can help prevent cognitive decline by eating nuts and olive oil. One of the ways in which to have a balanced diet of that type is the Mediterranean diet. It's not the only one. Since I get asked about it all the time, I'm sharing it with you. It's a diet rich in vegetables, fruits, beans, whole grains, fish, and unsaturated fatty acids, often in the form of olive oil or nuts, like we just talked about. If there's consumption of alcohol, it's usually during the meals and not on its own. And red meats are pretty limited. The Mediterranean diet shows a slower rate of decline in cognitive tests, a decreased risk of dementia, and overall all the other neurodegenerative diseases. Especially adding in mixed nuts or olive oil leads to a reduced risk of stroke. And this is actually compared to a diet that's low fat, not to a diet that's, pizza and soda. There's a greatly reduced Alzheimer's disease risk, and that's been demonstrated with the Mediterranean diet for at least 60 years. So yes, it does work. It's important to improve vascular health, and this is one of the diets that can do that. When you eat something like the Mediterranean diet, you have a lower white matter hyperintensity volume, and that's a really good thing in the brain. This means that you're at less risk for things like strokes and dementia. And you have reduced cerebrovascular disease burden, which also means all sorts of stuff that could go wrong is less likely to go wrong. We slow neurodegeneration. Neurodegeneration can be things like memory loss, confusion, irritability, and Alzheimer's. We've seen a lot of evidence that the Mediterranean diet is really good for staving off Alzheimer's. I'm happy to go into as much detail as anybody wants. I'm also happy to speak offline. Let's see, I see something here. I see a Q&A.
Yep.
Oh, yes, there are. So the interesting thing with the vegetarian diet is that other questions coming in. Okay. You absolutely are able to get all of the nutrients, the vitamins and minerals and the macronutrients that you need from the vegetarian diet, but you need to be careful about it because it's not as easy to get them from vegetarian foods. You have to eat a lot more of the vegetarian food typically, and sometimes that's hard to do because a bushel of spinach this big is actually quite large in volume. So it needs to be balanced out. It's worth going over with a nutritionist in detail what you're eating and how much of it so that we can make sure that all of your essential amino acids, for example, are covered. It's a great question. Oh goodness, if I knew the answer to how do you get a 3-year-old to eat, I think, God, I'd know a lot of things. I think somebody else might be better suited to answer that one. I would say that one thing we've noticed with adults who lose their appetite, either because of a cancer diagnosis or something else, is we help them, we encourage them to make the food pretty. It's worth arranging it in an aesthetic way on the plate. It's worth putting the different foods on different plates. Maybe even if the cutlery is hard to use, getting ones that are easier to use. Those are things that we've seen work with adults. I don't know if that would help with kids, but I hope it does. Intermittent fasting works for some people. You need to make sure that at the times that you're not doing the intermittent fasting, that you are achieving everything we just talked about. The sufficient water intake, sufficient sleep, sufficient protein, macronutrients, vitamins, and minerals. It's worth keeping a food diary. Those are really good. And you want to be honest with yourself on there. How many servings, how many grams of something you've had. Honestly, maybe get, this isn't my area of expertise in neuroimaging, but maybe get a blood test too to make sure that you're not doing something that's going to be harmful later. Oh, yes. Okay. So dairy needs to be balanced with everything else. Dairy contains carb and fat. I don't know if you saw the part where we said it's best to make sure that fat is early on in your meal or snack for your mood and also to prevent overeating. So let's see, cheese has a lot more fat in it than yogurt or milk do, for example. If you're going to have yogurt, maybe add a protein to the yogurt. It slows down the rate that the sugar reaches the blood, and it prevents this sort of irritability that can come from eating a lot of the sugar at once. There are some adults for whom dairy is not a good idea. I think speak to a nutritionist about your personal case to see if that is a good option for you. Supplements, when taken in the correct recommended doses, have not been shown to be harmful. What I've heard of happening with the gummies is somebody might eat half a bottle of gummy vitamins, kind of treating it like a gummy candy as opposed to a gummy nutritional supplement. So that's definitely something that should be avoided. Yeah, so it's really interesting. If you want to feel full from fewer calories, neuroscience has shown that eating the fat part of your meal, so let's say you're having, I don't know, let's say you're having an omelet with avocado on the side. Having some of the avocado first before eating the omelet has actually been shown to make you more satisfied with your food and keep you full longer, as in you get hungry later in the day, and also keeps you full from a smaller amount. So you may not finish the omelet if you do it that way, whereas if you had started with the carb part of your meal, you may find that you will eat more. Please let me know if that answered the question about fat. That's a really cool finding that we have in neuroimaging. Hi, Selma, thank you for your question. Yeah, this is a great question. So almond milk is mostly water. Almonds themselves do contain a considerable amount of the good fats. And so almonds themselves, maybe if you started out with 2 or 3 almonds in the morning, you might be able to do that fat kick in the morning. Some people do coconut oil in their coffee in order to have that fat beginning. This isn't a rule, right? You don't have to start your meals and snacks with fat. This is something that we get asked often because we have some neuroimaging findings about it in our lab. And because people are always kind of looking for a way to feel full from eating less. And so that's something that we've seen with that. The truth of long-term weight loss is, let's see where that is. The truth of long-term weight loss is that there's no magic formula for the body other than if you eat the amount that you burn, you will be weight stable. And if you eat less than you burn, you'll lose weight. And if you eat more than you burn, you'll gain weight. The question is, how do you get yourself to not eat more than you need to? And that's where all this other stuff we talked about today comes in, with stress causing us to eat when we're not hungry, with emotions causing us to eat when we're not hungry, recognizing those emotions and then starting to do something about them so that we don't address our emotions by, what is it called, eating our feelings. This is something we should try to. Fasting works for some people. You want to make sure that you're getting everything you need during those times that you're not fasting. I think a common issue is water intake during the times that you're not fasting, because how are people going to have those 8 glasses of water in a fewer number of hours unless you're paying attention, right? Unless you've got your water right there with you. So fasting works for some people. Juice cleanses, you want to make sure that they're not too carb heavy and that they're balanced. It's really something that maybe you should get a blood test for to make sure that you're doing things balanced. Any questions on the neuroimaging? Where's the neuroimaging here? There are a couple of high-calorie foods that are good for you. So avocados are very high in fats, but they're a good kind of fat. You can still overdo it though. You can still gain weight by eating a lot of calories, even if they're kind of good calories. And almonds are the same way, right? Nuts and seeds are high calorie, and so if you have the appropriate amount of them, you should be okay, but it's possible to overdo it. One example I like to give is there's an average of 40 peanuts in a spoon of peanut butter. Now, how long does it take you to eat 40 peanuts? And how long does it take you to eat a spoon of peanut butter? It's the same number of calories. Same thing with eating an orange versus drinking orange juice. If you're gonna have the same amount of calories, but you're gonna have it in seconds as opposed to minutes, there's a danger of overeating or eating more than you intended to eat. Almond milk is mostly water. It does contain, almonds usually sit in water, and then the almonds are removed, and then that water that remains has carrageenan added to it, and then it becomes almond milk. So they do contain some of the nutritional content of an almond. They're mostly water. So looking at these brain images here, I'm reminded of a study that we did. We gave people with obesity pictures of hamburgers and french fries and carrot sticks when they were lying in the MRI scanner. And we found that people with obesity have as much excitation in the brain as Well, it was equivalent to sexual excitation when they saw a picture of a hamburger while lying in the MRI scanner. And so why would someone with obesity get as excited over a picture of a hamburger as sexual activity? So the answer to that is there are a lot of changes in these neurotransmitters that are towards unhealthy that cause this person to be in an unhealthy cycle where now this person is going to keep overeating. And they're working on medications for this. These brain images really help them figure out what to do with those medications. And there's actually surgeries for this too, to kind of stop these unhealthy neuronal circuits from forming. Because in someone who doesn't have obesity, we don't see that sort of excitation and association with food. So some people watch cooking shows and it causes them to eat more, and some people watch cooking shows and it causes them to feel more full and eat less. I would assume it's 50-50. I don't know that I've seen any sort of a leaning on that statistically. So I would say if it works for you. What's on the screen here is functional MRIs. So if you see all these colors here, they all mean different things. The red means that you have less activity in that part of the brain, and the blue means you have more activity. And what's remarkable is someone who had sexual excitation from looking at a picture of a hamburger will undergo either medical treatment, like a medication or a surgery, or maybe cognitive behavioral therapy, and we'll come back and then we'll see a complete shift in what lights up in the brain when they look at the same exact picture that they looked at 6 months ago. These brain images help you understand what's going to help a person. So, you know, if I see that the prefrontal cortex is inhibited in an individual, I would recommend something in order for the PFC to kind of be encouraged. It might be CBT, it might be avoiding alcohol, it might be getting more sleep. And then, you know, that person will come back and that person will be making better choices. You'll put 2 + 2 in the scanner and that person will reach the conclusion of 4 faster in their mind when you've seen, for example, a change in diet or a change in sleep. We're recommended to get at least 60 grams of protein a day. How you divide up those grams of protein is up to you. If you have other reasons why your doctor recommends that you shouldn't have red meat, then you know you should always follow those recommendations. And those, for the person who asked the vegetarian question, you can get 60 grams of protein from a vegetarian diet. You just have to be a little bit more mindful of the amounts coming in, just to make sure you get them. Someone asked about the keto diet before we started. The keto diet can be amazing, but it needs to be done properly as well. There's a type of epilepsy where children really, have 60 seizures a minute, basically 1 a second. It's essentially the brain seizing. That EEG of electrical activity is off the charts. And medications, for the individuals for whom medication has not helped, going on a keto diet has. It seems to calm down the brain in a way that nothing else does. This is a keto diet correctly done, right? So at least 20-25 grams of carbs a day, and a sufficient number of calories from fats and proteins, and sufficient water and any supplementation that's needed by the provider who's overseeing this. Keto is hard to do without maybe a registered dietitian kind of keeping tabs on you. Let me go back to Marcina. I think you said you were going to send this out. I'm happy to speak further with anybody. Here's my contact info. Where is it? There it is. Thank you all so much for taking the time to talk to us tonight.
Well, thank you, Shaunte, for that very informative presentation. And thank you, all of you who came for participating. So when you leave this evening, you will be redirected to an evaluation form, and we would really appreciate it if you would fill it out. Please share your ideas, or if you think of any later, you can contribute your thoughts on our website, burbanklibrary.org. Thank you again, and have a good evening.